Hello, I'm Cheryl McCarthy. Welcome to One to One. This spring, as Americans emerged from more than a year of COVID 19 lockdown, the number of street crimes appeared to soar. Hate crimes against Asian Americans, shootouts on sidewalks, assaults on flight attendants by enraged passengers, and subway riders attacked for no apparent reason. What caused this surge in post lockdown violence? The release of pressures that had built up during the lockdown, anger over protest against the police killings of African Americans, and what led Americans to buy 3 million more guns at the beginning of the lockdown than they had the year before. Here to explain the possible reasons for and the possible responses to these developments is Candace McCoy, Professor of Criminal Justice at John Jay College and the CUNY Graduate Center. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It does seem as if we've seen an increase in the amount of sort of erratic, violent behavior since the lockdown ended. Has crime actually increased as a result of the pandemic?
Cheryl, I know that the media accounts that we get throughout this pandemic have emphasized these sorts of attacks that you're talking about. But overall, crime has dropped during the pandemic a lot. What we used to see in street crimes, robberies, thefts, assaults, have dropped. People are fearful right now. And when fear is part of your life and you're maybe really afraid of a virus, the fear spills out into a lot of areas. What you've just set out in terms of rise in particular kinds of crime is absolutely accurate. But in terms of general overall street crime, we are in a very, very low crime period right now.
And one thing, when people are locked up, when they're told not to go out except to the grocery store or to the doctor, I guess you don't have as many people out there who can get into, illegal stuff, correct?
Absolutely. And we have seen a rise, and not surprising, criminologists predicted this, in domestic violence. People caged together, not a good situation. And so this is a serious problem as well as the ones you've mentioned. I think that some of the crimes you've mentioned, such as the hate crimes against Asian Americans, which usually involved verbal assaults, yelling, pointing, have gone up and down. The subway assaults that you've mentioned, although important, have not really shot up. What's kind of interesting is a crime that has increased in the pandemic is bicycle theft. People trying to avoid being on the subways,
okay,
or public transport. Very interesting. But in general, as I say, it's low. But the really scary part of it, which was not predicted, when I say not predicted, criminologists such as myself will did a lot of thinking at the beginning of the pandemic as to what to expect. And we predicted it was going to drop generally, and it has. What we did not predict is this scary and tragic rise in gun violence, primarily in neighborhoods that are impoverished. A lot's going on there, and it is really scary when those shootings spill over to innocent bystanders.
I was reading that spikes in gun sales usually occur when individuals are worried about possible restrictions on gun sales. Like after Sandy Hook, after the shootings at San Bernardino, after Parkland, when everybody started talking about, gun control, gun control, gun control. But a recent study by the Brookings Institute concluded that the 2020 spike in gun sales was less about concern about not being able to have access to firearms and more about concerns for personal safety.
Absolutely.
Tell me about that. So how does a gun, during a pandemic, how does a gun make you feel safe?
Well, why are you fearful? And therefore, what are you going to do to make yourself feel safe? The fearfulness side of this is a cultural issue that Americans must confront. One of the most important questions that Americans should be asking themselves right now is not necessarily should we have gun control, should we not have gun control, under what circumstances should we allow people to have guns, et cetera, all of which are very important. But why do we want guns anyway? What's the point of that? Other nations don't do this. What is it about Americans that, besides the fact that there's the Second Amendment, and so we've done it forever? It's more than the Second Amendment. I would suggest to you, Cheryl, when we're talking about the personal safety questions that you have raised, is why do I fear for my personal safety to begin with? Especially in times of low crime, which in fact has been the case for the last 2 decades in the United States. Crime is really low.
And so what do you think is the answer to that? Why are people concerned about their personal safety at a time when crime has dropped dramatically?
Absolutely. So as you say, and the Brookings Institution study was very interesting on this, over the previous years, there have been increases in gun purchasing and ownership at times when people who want guns think that the laws are going to change so as to prevent them from getting guns. Laws didn't change, but nevertheless, it just kept ballooning. And this time it was different. This year it was different. Why? The gun purchases really started to increase with the pandemic in March of 2020. And they went through the roof when the protests of Black Lives Matter over that summer occurred. Now, think about that. People in the pandemic, in their homes, hunkered down, can't leave, are somehow fearful that burglars or rapists are going to come for them. You know, that's extremely unlikely. So we play out our fears in so many ways, and fears of so many things that are not necessarily rational. And we get guns because we think we're going to be under attack, but we're not. Same thing with the Black Lives Matter protests. For the most part, there were thousands and thousands of people in the streets. These protests did not end up having anybody breaking into anybody's house. There was some looting by people mostly unaffiliated with the protests of stores. Very unfortunate. But that doesn't account for why private citizens would go out and buy guns to protect Bloomingdale's. I don't think so.
I remember the scene of a white couple who, while the protesters were going past their home peacefully, were standing outside, both of them with guns, as if they were afraid that they were gonna.
That is a perfect example. Look up that video, folks. Those were the folks in Missouri who, both of them, personal injury lawyers, had a very expensive house in a gated community. Well, the gated community was not so gated. There was a public thoroughfare. And the Black Lives Matter people in their protest went down that thoroughfare. Now, the folks, the two people involved, apparently thought that that whole demonstration was coming for their house and them. what kind of irrational, bizarre fears? And by the way, then they got rewarded for that, their actions of waving their guns and threatening by being placed in a prominent position at, in the Republican National Convention subsequently.
Interesting. I know the Brookings study seemed to suggest that when there's a general sense of national anxiety, whether it's caused by COVID or by the economic downturn or by injustice in policing or by people protesting injustice in policing or discussions about defunding the police, then people start to, arm themselves.
Yes, fears generally. And this is an important point too. We don't know who bought those guns. We hopefully.
Whether they were legal or illegal, we don't know.
Right. We know the names of people. We don't know their races. We don't know the reasons. There's good possibility that there was a rise in gun ownership among Black Americans because fears of white supremacists that were being stoked during the election season. Also fears of the pandemic, just generally among the citizenry, would produce a rise in gun ownership among people of color.
So even the shootings that we have seen that have been reported so much in the news lately, erratic kind of shootings, they have not actually gone up? The shootings have not actually gone up?
Shootings have
Okay.
gone up, but in particular neighborhoods, in a particular demographic group. They have gone up nationwide, by the way. This is not New York City we're talking. This has happened in every city, small cities, of about 200,000 people. You will see the reports of the shootings occurring here in New York State, Rochester, Utica, Syracuse, cities of that size, and they're ballooning compared to previous years. Now, why would that be? The shootings are occurring almost exclusively among young men in their teens and 20s, live in impoverished or low-income neighborhoods, and who are Black. This is a tragedy. This is a real tragedy. And the motivations and the reasons for that can be discussed, but more particularly as a matter of social policy, it's here. It's not a question of why, although we can talk about that, but it's here. So what do we do about it?
Following up on that, for decades, journalists, politicians, social workers, law enforcement people have equated violent crime with poverty and unemployment. However, I was surprised to read that some research has shown almost no correlation between the unemployment rates and violent crime rates. So,
that's right.
Or that they say unemployment is linked to shoplifting, but not to violent felonies. So do we know why these young Black men in impoverished neighborhoods are shooting at people?
Well, we don't know, but if we rely on the criminological research, we would expect that when it's called control theory, and to a degree strain theory. The controls of schools, for instance, schools are during the pandemic, not in session. The teenagers did not have that structure in their lives. Furthermore, although unemployment per se is not affiliated with violent crime, closely correlated, and part of the reason is that very low wage employment doesn't really change your impoverished status. You just manage to carry on. Nevertheless, a lot of those young men had uh, uh, part-time or low-paid employment before the pandemic, and it provided, again, structure in their lives. Furthermore, from a strain perspective, the pandemic diverted the resources and attention of the elders who were very concerned about just the kids at home trying to learn online, trying to deal with the disease of COVID itself, the deaths occurring in these neighborhoods, the traumas occurring in these neighborhoods. The people who ordinarily would be, again, providing structure in these young men's lives had their attention elsewhere.
So should we consider these shootings as erratic behavior just sort of perhaps a temporary uptick that has been caused by extraordinary circumstances? Because as you said, the crime rate, violent crimes have been going down dramatically for at least 20 years.
That's a great question. Is it just a quick flash in the pan and then we'll go back? I would tend to say yes, except for this fact. Those guns are out there now.
Yeah.
And the iron pipeline is real. The sale of the smuggling of illegal guns from southern states in which there are no restrictions and in which there are many, many gun dealers who do not register their firearms and then put them into the market needs to be stopped, intercepted, suppressed. The Biden administration recently repurposed $1 billion of funding that was designated for pandemic relief, stating that this is pandemic related, and have I think tripled the number of ATF investigators to look into where the guns are coming from and to target these illegal dealers. It's just like drugs.
So you have, Biden announcing a war on what is it? A war on
guns.
A war on guns. Also, you have before he was forced to resign in a sexual harassment scandal, Governor Andrew Cuomo declared a new state emergency around gun violence, said he was committing about $139 million to reverse the trend of shootings, and including $76 million to create jobs and activities for young people. And de Blasio and the city council have got in on it. They've agreed to add $200 million to the New York City Police Department, mostly for police overtime, plus $100 million to anti-violence programs under the mayor's office. Now, all of this sounds like initiatives we've heard of before.
War on drugs. Oh, no, this time it's the war on guns.
What do you think of these initiatives, and have any of them worked in the past?
So I'm sorry I interrupted you there, Cheryl, but yeah, everything you were describing was the war on drugs. And now we're just using the same tools for the war on guns. I do think that there are a lot of parallels there. Did the war on drugs work? In some ways, but most ways not.
And it caused a lot of harm.
It caused a lot of harm. And the reason it did was because of over-policing and over-punishment. And so why would we do the same now for a war on guns, especially when we know the most serious problems right now are in impoverished neighborhoods, and the offenders are young Black men? Why would we, again, create the same harms? So we have to learn from the past.
So what approach would you recommend to address the crime situation and the gun situation that we have?
3 prongs. We just talked about the first, which is stop this illegal supply as much as you can. One advantage of at least suppressing that illegal flow of firearms is that the price of the guns will go up. And we want that. They're too cheap. You can get these things easily. Second prong would be what is called violence interrupters. These are well understood programs that have been around for many decades. Professor David Kennedy at John Jay College is extremely well known nationwide for sort of inventing what is called ceasefire. And it's a focused deterrence model in which you find the young people at risk and you tell them, listen, we're watching you, the guns have got to go. If you do something like this, you're going to be arrested. That is a policing-centered model. It's been shown to work in many ways, but only when it's better when it is paired with the same kind of programs you just mentioned. That, for instance, the De Blasio administration has suggested that you put them into the employment and training. Another model of the same type is the violence interrupters model. The best known is in Chicago, but these programs are all around the nation. It does not rely on policing as much. It relies more on community members who are recruited by city government and have often criminal records themselves and have been there and have seen how bad things can get. And are basically the informed adults in the room who take the kids, all of them, and work with them and get into the networks and understand who is angry at whom, who is claiming to be disrespected. This is a really big deal, the disrespect among the young people themselves, and talk them down, talk them out of it, get them moving. That is done with the knowledge and discussion with the public police, but it is not primarily run by the police.
If we know that these strategies work, why are we doing them on a broader scale?
They do work. They have been well evaluated. They don't work as well as we would wish. They don't stop at all. We still are going to have dead young people and maybe bystanders, but it reduces.
And that's what you said, that we should not focus on elimination of crime, elimination of guns, but we should work on reduction of crime, reduction of guns, reduction of, this kind of behavior.
Let's be realistic.
So if you had to write a headline for a story about how the pandemic has affected crime, what would it say? I'm basically asking you, how would you summarize what is happening?
Crime is down, fear is up.
Okay, I think that probably says it all.
I'm usually not a good headline writer, but you really put me on the spot.
That one was pretty good. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I'd like to thank Candace McCoy, Professor of Criminal Justice at John Jay College and the CUNY Graduate Center, for joining me today. To learn about our upcoming shows, be sure to follow us on Twitter at 121 CUNY TV. For the City University of New York and 121, I'm Cheryl McCarthy.